The Doric Temple. It is one of the oldest and most powerful architectural forms ever conceived by the ancient Greeks. The Doric order emerged around the 7th century BCE, primarily on the Greek mainland and in the western colonies of Sicily and southern Italy. What makes it immediately recognizable is its bold simplicity. The columns are thick, sturdy, and rise directly from the temple floor without any base. The capital at the top is plain and circular, topped by a flat rectangular slab. There are no decorative flourishes here. Every element exists to communicate strength, discipline, and permanence. The Parthenon in Athens stands as perhaps the most celebrated example, and yet even that masterpiece began with this foundational template. The Doric form was not just a style. It was a statement of values. A civilization declaring through stone that order and strength were sacred. And what came next would begin to soften that severity in fascinating ways. The Ionic Temple. If the Doric spoke with authority, the Ionic whispered with elegance. This style developed along the eastern coast of Greece, particularly in the region known as Ionia, which sits along the western coast of modern-day Turkey. It appeared slightly later than the Doric order, gaining prominence around the 6th century BCE. The most distinctive feature of the Ionic Temple is its column capital, which is decorated with a scroll-like ornament called a volute. The columns themselves are more slender and graceful than their Doric counterparts, and they rest on a molded base that lifts them gently from the ground. The overall impression is one of refinement rather than raw power. The Temple of Hera on the island of Samos was an early and influential example, drawing visitors from across the Mediterranean. The Greeks were clearly exploring two different visions of the divine, and they were not done yet. The Corinthian Temple. It is the most ornate of all three classical Greek orders, and its origins carry an almost mythological charm. The Corinthian order is said to have been invented by the sculptor Callimachus in the 5th century BCE, supposedly inspired by the sight of an acanthus plant growing around a basket left on a young girl's grave. Whether that story is entirely true matters less than what it reveals about Greek culture. They looked to the natural world for beauty and meaning. The defining feature of the Corinthian capital is its elaborate carved leaves of the acanthus plant, spiraling upward in rich decorative detail. This style became enormously popular, particularly in the Hellenistic period and later among the Romans. The Temple of Olympian Zeus in Athens, though completed under Roman rule, remains one of the grandest expressions of Corinthian ambition ever constructed. The Peripteral Temple. This term describes not a decorative style, but an architectural configuration, and it became one of the most iconic temple layouts in all of Greek civilization. A peripteral temple is one surrounded on all four sides by a single row of columns, forming a continuous colonnade known as a peristyle. This design gave the temple a commanding presence from every angle, making it appear almost like a forest of stone when viewed from a distance. The Parthenon is again a prime example, but the layout appeared across hundreds of temples throughout the Greek world. The surrounding columns were not purely decorative. They created a covered walkway that allowed worshippers to approach, observe, and move around the sacred structure with a sense of ceremony. The exterior itself became part of the religious experience. But some temples pushed this concept even further by adding a second layer of columns entirely. The Dicteral Temple. Where the Peripteral Temple surrounded its inner chamber with one row of columns, the Dicteral Temple doubled that ambition entirely. Two complete rows of columns wrapped around the entire building, creating a dramatically deep and shadowed colonnade that was both architecturally extraordinary and visually overwhelming. This design required immense resources and remarkable engineering precision. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, counted among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, followed this configuration and featured over 100 columns in total. Walking towards such a structure, ancient visitors would have experienced a sense of gradual revelation, passing through column after column before ever reaching the inner sanctuary. The dipteral form was reserved for the most important deities and the wealthiest city-states. It communicated divine scale. It made mortals feel appropriately small, and that feeling was entirely intentional. The pseudodipteral temple. This variation is perhaps one of the most clever architectural compromises ever devised in the ancient world. The pseudodipteral temple gives the visual impression of the dipteral layout, with its wide and deep colonnade, but removes the inner row of columns entirely. The result is a much more spacious walkway around the inner chamber, while retaining the grand exterior appearance of a double-column temple. The ancient architect Hermogenes of Priene is credited with either inventing or popularizing this configuration around the 3rd century BCE, and he reportedly described it as a way to preserve grandeur without wasting the interior space that inner columns consumed. His Temple of Artemis at Magnesia is a celebrated example of this thinking. It reveals how Greek architects were not merely building for tradition. They were actively solving problems, refining ideas, and pushing their craft towards something more efficient and expressive. The Tholos Temple. Not every Greek temple was rectangular. Some of the most mysterious and visually striking sanctuaries were built in a completely different shape, one that has puzzled historians and architects for centuries. The Tholos is a circular temple, with columns arranged in a ring around a circular inner chamber. Its origins are debated. Those circular sacred structures appear in Greek culture as far back as the Bronze Age. The most famous examples include the Tholos at Delphi and the Tholos at Epidaurus, both of which stood within major religious sanctuaries. What made these structures unusual was not just their shape, but their unclear function. Unlike standard temples, the circular inner chamber often had no obvious cult statue or clear ritual purpose that historians can confirm. The Tholos may have served as a treasury, a hero shrine, or something far more enigmatic that time has not fully explained. The Prostyle Temple. This is a more restrained and focused temple design, one that concentrates all of its columnar grandeur at the front. A prostyle temple features columns only along the front facade, with the remaining 3 sides consisting of solid walls. The effect is one of directed attention. Approaching the temple from the front, a worshipper would see a full colonnade, framing the entrance with formality and reverence. But move around to the sides or the back and the structure feels altogether different, simpler and more enclosed. This design was particularly common in smaller urban settings where space was limited or where the temple faced a specific public plaza. The prostyle format was also widely adopted by the Romans, who adapted it enthusiastically. It offered a practical balance between architectural dignity and economic construction. The Greeks understood early that not every sacred space required the same scale of expression. The Amphiprostyle Temple. Taking the logic of the prostyle one step further, the Amphiprostyle Temple placed columns at both the front and the back of the building, while the sides remained solid walls. This created a temple with 2 distinct colonnaded facades, giving it a more symmetrical and complete appearance from multiple directions. The design was relatively rare in the Greek world, but carried significant symbolic weight. Having a grand entrance on both ends suggested a kind of dual purpose or dual reverence, a building open to the sacred from more than one direction. The small but exquisite temple of Athena Nike on the Athenian Acropolis is a celebrated amphiprostyle example, its elegant Ionic columns framing both ends of the structure with quiet precision. Standing on a projecting bastion above the city, this temple demonstrated that even modest dimensions could carry tremendous dignity when proportions were handled with care. The Anantes Temple. This is one of the simplest and oldest Greek temple configurations, and understanding it helps reveal how the entire tradition began. An enthusiast temple features columns placed between two projecting walls, known as antae, at the front of the building. Rather than standing freely in a wide colonnade, the columns are tucked into the porch created by those walls, giving the entrance a sheltered, almost intimate quality. The design appears in some of the earliest Greek sacred structures, and continued to be used throughout the classical period, particularly for smaller shrines and treasuries. Some temples combine the enthusiast design at the back with a pro-style colonnade at the front, blending configurations to suit specific ritual or spatial needs. This flexibility speaks to a broader truth about Greek architecture. The rules existed not as rigid constraints, but as a shared vocabulary that skilled builders could adapt with intelligence and intention. The monopteral temple. Here is a temple form that breaks almost every convention associated with the word temple itself. The monopteros is a circular colonnade of columns arranged in a ring, but with no inner chamber at all. There are no walls enclosing a sacred room, no roof over a sanctuary space in the traditional sense. Just columns rising from a circular platform, open to the sky and the surrounding landscape. This form may have been used to mark a sacred natural feature, such as a spring, a tree, or a spot believed to have divine significance. The structure did not shelter a deity inside. It framed a presence already felt in the natural world. Some examples survive from the Hellenistic and later Roman periods, and they carry an almost meditative quality. They remind us that for the ancient Greeks, the sacred was not always something locked away behind walls, but something encountered in the open world. The Niskos Temple. Small in scale but rich in meaning, the Niskos was a miniature temple form used across the Greek world in a surprising variety of contexts. The word itself simply means little temple, and these structures appeared as votive offerings inside larger sanctuaries, as decorative architectural frames carved in relief on grave stelae, and as actual small freestanding shrines erected in homes, workshops, and public spaces. Their proportions mirrored the full-size temple tradition faithfully, complete with columns, pediments, and entablatures rendered in precise miniature form. In funerary art, the Niskos frame became a way of elevating the deceased, presenting them within a sacred architectural setting as though they had passed into a divine realm. These small structures reveal something quietly profound about Greek culture. Sacred architecture was not reserved only for grand civic projects. It permeated daily life at every scale, from the colossal to the intimate. From the thundering colonnades of the dipteral sanctuary to the open sky of the monopteros, Greek temple architecture tells a story of a civilization that never stopped asking how best to honor the divine. Each form we have explored carried its own logic, its own beauty, and its own answer to the question of what sacred space should feel like. These were not simply buildings. They were philosophical statements carved in stone, tested by time, and refined across centuries. The Greeks gave the world an architectural language that still shapes how we design spaces meant to inspire awe. If you found this journey through ancient temple forms fascinating, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. There is always more hidden knowledge waiting to be uncovered, from the ancient world to the patterns of history, culture, and civilization that quietly shape everything around us.